Hello there my RPG lovers and welcome to another video. Elex 2 is an open world action RPG from the developers of Gothic and recent series. If you're following my channel, you probably know that I'm a big fan of their games, so there's always a chance to be a little bit biased in these kinds of reviews. I covered Elex 1 in depth back in 2017, and even though that game had a lot of problems, it was still a pretty solid RPG. But going back to Elex 1 after I played the sequel for about 120 hours doesn't feel really good. To be honest, Elex 1 feels like an early alpha build of Elex 2 in terms of the controls and the feel of the gameplay. That was the first sign of some major improvements. Piranha Bytes obviously got a much bigger budget for the sequel, and I guess it has something to do with THQ Nordic because they bought this studio back in 2019. Is it a AAA RPG? No, it's more of a AA RPG with some janky elements in the gameplay, but to a lot lesser extent than in Elex 1. Overall, it's a major improvement over the first game in almost every aspect. Almost. I will try to break down every major aspect of this game while keeping the spoilers at minimum. So let's not waste any more time on the intro.
You're starting to get on my nerves.
The setting in Elex games is pretty unique. It has a mix of medieval and sci-fi themes with a post-apocalyptic world. I'm a big fan of medieval fantasy settings in RPGs, but I'm not so crazy about post-apocalyptic sci-fi worlds. Laser guns? In my RPG? That's why I was a bit skeptical before Elex came out in 2017. But it turned out to be a really interesting and unique setting with a great story. The planet of Magellan was struck by a comet about 200 years ago, and people who survived started forming different factions. The comet also brought Elex, a new alien element that completely changed the planet, the people, and every living being. All factions are using this element in one way or another. Elex 2 takes place a few years after the events of the first game. The whole sequel is basically a major spoiler for the first game, so if you didn't play Elex 1, even the beginning of this game is going to spoil everything. So here's your chance to go back and do a playthrough of Elex 1. You can always come back and watch the video, I'll still be here, I promise. Because I love you. Once again we play as Jax, who apparently got exiled because he turned into one of those "the end is near" lunatics. But for a good reason. Last chance to avoid spoilers for Elex 1. You still there? Good. The ending in Elex 1 was a huge cliffhanger. Alien invasion was inevitable and Jax tried to warn everyone about these upcoming threats. But people are more concerned about their own problems and wars between their factions. Even though we had multiple endings in the first game, Piranha Bytes decided to stick with only one of those endings for the sequel. I kinda expected the option to import our saves from Elex 1, which would be a logical thing to do. But it seems that would be too ambitious and unnecessarily complicated for this small studio. And besides that, the majority of players finished the game with quote-unquote true ending. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter because Elex 2 has a strong enough reason for starting as a fresh level 1 Jax again. Well, fresh is probably not the best way to put it because Jax got infected by one of those alien creatures and he almost died. This happens right after the short tutorial section of the game. The aliens finally arrived and are the main focus of the story. One of your main quests is to figure out the aliens and their origins. The game does a great job of making these creatures really mysterious, and I think their design is pretty cool. After these alien creatures almost killed Jax in the tutorial cinematic, he gets saved by a strange dude called Adam.
You were lucky. It could have been a lot worse.
It turns out he's actually the hybrid. The hybrid. You know, the main antagonist of the first game, he somehow survived, and this dude is like 200 years old. Don't worry, this ain't a spoiler because you learn this very early in the game. Elex 2 has a ton of dialogue and unique NPCs. Some of them are returning characters from Elex 1, but we got a ton of new faces as well. There are a lot of flashbacks from the first game as well, and it's supposed to give some context to new players who didn't play the first game, or just remind the old players about the past. The writing is really good, and dialogue interactions are interesting in general, even when you're talking with completely unimportant characters that don't even have a quest for you. Although that's quite rare, because the majority of named characters will give you some quests, or they're at least involved in a quest. The game has an impressive amount of great side quests, and a lot of them are usually connected with factions. So it almost never feels like you're doing pointless busy work. For example, the Berserkers won't let you in the fort before you do some work for them.
You think I'm just standing here for my health?
But it's all up to you how you're going to approach these situations. A couple of major cities have upper districts, which are not accessible if you don't do some quests for that particular faction. This was a bit nostalgic to experience if you played older Gothic games. And for the first time ever in Piranha Bytes games, we have children NPCs and some really interesting quests related to them.
Hey, it's no fun if you don't play along.
After the events of Elex 1, Jax and Kaya became parents. Kaya was an important character from Elex 1 and she can also be your follower in this game as well. One of your main quests in the beginning is to find Dex, your son. Wait, Jax? Dex? Jack and Dexter? Wow, almost died. But this won't turn into Fallout 4, don't worry, you'll find him almost instantly. Kaya is definitely one of the most developed characters in the game, and I like her a lot more in Elex 2.
Run and hide like you always do?
I did not run away.
Sometimes it feels like the game is dragging on a bit with the sheer amount of dialogue it has. People just like to talk a lot in this game, which won't be everyone's cup of tea. This kinda balances out with the amount of fighting and exploring you're going to do in the game, but we'll talk about that when we get to the gameplay. The cold system from the first game is back, which means that a lot of your dialogue interactions will have meaningful choices. A lot of dialogue options will either increase or decrease your cold level, but people will usually treat you the same regardless of your cold level. It's a little bit different with followers because you get to build actual relationship with them.
Maybe, but that doesn't help me.
The game has 7 different companions that you can find in the worlds. All of them have a unique backstory and quests that you can do from time to time, even though some of them feel a bit repetitive. These quests have a very defined gameplay loop, and it usually involves you killing some things. What kinda bothers me more than it should is that you get instantly teleported to the location of the follower quest. It happens all the time when you accept these quests, and it kinda feels really artificial and gamey. But it definitely saves you a lot of time, so some people will probably like this. However, a lot of these NPC interactions feel really dynamic. The companions come to you every once in a while and they offer you a new mission.
Commander, additional control node chips located. Iteris, crater region.
And just like in the first game, they will react to things you do and get involved in dialogues with other NPCs.
I mean, did you guys have a little something going? Because this bitch is really freaking out.
If you value your life, be silent.
Oh yeah, so scared.
But I was a bit disappointed because it seems like the way you treat your followers doesn't really matter at the end, at least in my case. I'm pretty sure that all of my dialogue choices made Nasty dislike me and the game tells you that in your face. But even so, she never left me and she even helped me at the end. It doesn't make a lot of sense and it makes the relationship you build with them pointless.
Everything okay?
Mind your fucking business, alright?
That's just the case with Nasty. I had a good relationship with other companions, so I'm not really sure how would they behave if I treated them poorly. So yeah, you have some old companions from Elex 1 and some brand new ones. I found one of the companions very late in the game, so it's definitely possible to miss them. I kinda miss Duras from the first game though, unfortunately he is not in the sequel. Anyway, Adam, or the Hybrid, has an idea to create a new faction, which will focus on stopping the aliens. It's all up to you if you wish to trust this guy or not, and you can constantly speak shit to him at the expense of lowering your cold level. To be honest, he kinda deserves it. But even though that's the case, you are pretty much forced to do all main story quests through him, so it's not like you actually have a choice here. That will only make sense once you finish the game, but I won't spoil that of course. Right from the beginning, you get to work towards improving your faction by recruiting more people to fight with you. Your faction is called 6th Power because it's technically 6th faction in the game. You have a lot of freedom when it comes to factions in general. At a certain point, you'll have to decide which faction you belong to in order to push the main story forward. But this time around, you don't have to join any other major factions if you don't want to. You can just focus on progressing with 6th Power. It's hard to talk in depth about this without spoiling anything, but you can basically play as a double agent and betray the faction you are working for. Elex 1 was really strict with your faction choice, and I'm not saying that's not the case with Elex 2, but having these extra choices just makes more sense. After all, it's natural that you can change your mind about something, right? Especially when it comes to Jax, because after all, his main goal is to stop the aliens, he doesn't really care that much about individual factions. The place called Bastion is your hub area that's available right from the beginning. You can send all of your companions there as well as some important characters. You have a really nice house with all the tools you need and the Bastion has a couple of useful services. But I was hoping to see more base development here. But it turns out it's just a simple hub area. There is some customization, but it's minor. There is nothing wrong with Bastion as it is, the game just makes a big deal out of it during the story, so I guess I expected to see more. However, they did a much better job with this hub area compared to Elex 1. Elex 1 had Origin, and I'm pretty sure I discovered that location later in the game on my first playthrough. Bastion is a lot better in general, and you can discover it on your first quest basically. Speaking about individual factions, we got some new boys in the hood. We got 3 major factions that you can join: Alps, Morkans, and Berserkers. You can also join Outlaws or the Clerics, but they feel like minor factions in the game, especially the Clerics, who fell off really hard. Alps are not exactly a new faction, but in the first game you couldn't join them. They tried to kill Jax, who was also an Alp, and they were the main bad guys in the game. Well, things have changed quite a bit. Aliens, or the Skyans as the people called them, are now the main threat, while Alps became passive after we destroyed the hybrid in the first game. They are not completely passive though.
Execute the convicted party.
There are some really interesting interactions if you choose to work with your former faction. Alps are basically super soldiers who consume Elex to increase their strength at the cost of losing emotions. When Jax destroyed the hybrid, they realized it's not a good idea to completely suppress emotional thinking, so they consume a lot less Elex now. Some of the best side quests are related to Alps, so don't miss out on them. The Berserkers remained the same for the most part, but they expanded quite a bit. Now they control the whole Tower Desert and the fort, which was previously outlaw territory. And in case you haven't noticed, Tower is not a desert anymore. The world hearts that Berserkers are taking care of have transformed it into a forest area. I completed my first playthrough of the game with Berserkers, and I almost finished all the quests with Alps on my second playthrough. When I was done with Berserkers, I actually loaded a save just before I joined them, and I just continued with Alps. I was like level 20 plus at that point, so I can't really say I finished the game a couple of times from the very beginning. Anyway, Outlaws are not a huge fan of nature for some strange reason. I mean, their base is located in the crater, the same location where the comet hit 200 years ago. It's not exactly a great source of fresh air, if you ask me. To be honest, I always thought that Outlaws were the dumbest faction in Elex. I'm not saying that organized criminals are not realistic, especially in this setting, but the way they function seems extremely counterproductive, although I guess that's exactly why they fell off and got trampled by Berserkers. But a lot of them got converted to Berserkers in the process. Remember this guy?
I suppose I can't blame you for forgetting me.
Yeah, the Clerics are a former shadow of themselves. They were a force to be reckoned with in the first game, but even back then they lacked the manpower. The Horde in Ignanon has fallen, and now they occupy an abandoned castle. So yeah, Outlaws and Clerics kinda fell off, but they still have a lot of quests for you, and you can join them of course. Morkans are a completely new faction, and they are completely insane as well.
It is our duty to eradicate our species in the name of balance.
It's another faction of religious fanatics, but unlike the Clerics, they believe in a brutal bloody god called Ravak. The location of their main city is in Karakis, which is also a brand new location in the game. It's a huge wasteland with a lot of ruins and tall skyscrapers, which are worth exploring. Even though Morkans seem like simple savages, they abide by strict rules imposed by their religion. You get the feeling that people from all factions are pretty normal for the most parts, and that most of them join the faction just to increase their chances for survival. That seems really believable actually. I'm pretty sure that this time around you can do all faction quests without pushing the main story forward, although all factions still have the level requirements for increasing your rank. For example, you need level 20 to become a warrior and a level 30 for paladin, or if you join the Alps you need level 20 for a trooper, level 30 for commander, and so on. It's pretty much the same for all factions. I really took my time with the game when I first got the beta key, and I had around 30 hours just in the first chapter. Yeah, the story is told in chapters again, the game has 4 chapters in total. The new chapter is usually triggered by talking with Adam when you complete a certain amount of main quests. Chapters keep the world space fresh because something new always happens in the world when you start a new chapter. It's an old system in Piranha Bytes games that just works great. The majority of the main story involves you fighting the Skyans. Jax got infected with a disease from the Skyans bite in the beginning cutscene, so you'll have to learn a lot about the Skyans in these quests in order to get rid of the disease. The thing is, they're not only invading the planet, they also started terraforming it. That means they are transforming a lot of animals and beasts into Skyan creatures. They brought another version of Elex with them called Dark Elex. It's a similar element to Blue Elex, but this version has the power to spread like a disease. Jax is resisting the infection, but you will constantly have these bright flashes and even some blackouts later on.
The infection. I'd already forgotten about it again.
This kinda serves to remind you about the main story and that you should try to solve these quests. It's a false sense of urgency that you can ignore for the most parts, but it does get a bit annoying sometimes. It doesn't affect the gameplay until those blackouts start happening. We could talk about the story a lot more, but I'm really trying to avoid spoilers. I have to say that I was kinda disappointed with the ending, even though I think the story itself is pretty good in the game. The best thing about the story are the characters and the quests. Come to think of it, that was always the best part about Piranha Bytes RPGs, not the main story itself. But the main story in both of these games is pretty damn good. The underwhelming ending made it a lot worse than it should be though. You just feel like you need more, maybe even a whole new chapter. The game is not short by any means, you can easily spend more than 60 hours in one playthrough. Not to mention the replay value with all different factions, it's really impressive. At the very end you get a lot of answers and in-depth explanation about almost everything. Almost. What I found really interesting about the main story, if you follow some subtle clues that you can find in the worlds, you can predict some things. And I was like, wow, I was right. To conclude the story discussion, I think it's pretty damn good, except the lackluster ending.
Alright, I have things to do, so let's wind this up.
Now let's talk about the gameplay. Elex 2 has a huge open world with no compromises. It's completely open right from the start and you can explore it however you want. Well, technically. Some parts of the world are really dangerous if your Jax is low level. Piranha Bytes didn't change their design philosophy when it comes to NPC levels. Once again, it seems like there is no level scaling in the game, which means that you can encounter people, beasts and monsters on the map of various levels. But even though the world can be really dangerous, the exploration is not extremely hindered because of this. You are able to outrun most dangerous beasts or just simply use your jetpack to move out of the dangerous way. And speaking of jetpack, this feature has gone through some major changes. The jetpack is a really important tool in Elex games and it allowed Piranha Bytes to go crazy with vertical exploration. The jetpack in the beginning is not that great. The fuel is really limited and you only have the basic functionality. That's because you have a separate line of progression for the jetpack. It has a couple of functions to unlock, but the most important thing to upgrade is definitely the fuel capacity. As you explore the world, you will find the jetpack fuel all over the place, and you can even buy it from some merchants. Looting this item is always really satisfying and it's kinda hard to miss because of its glow. I was regularly upgrading the fuel during my entire playthrough of the game and I still didn't manage to hit the full capacity. But after a certain threshold you won't feel like you need it anymore unless you really want to fly without worrying about the fuel. That's actually possible, but only after you finish the main quest. Then all of a sudden your jetpack no longer uses fuel and you can actually fly and explore the world. This felt absolutely amazing. But even before this, a fully upgraded jetpack is amazing. Especially when you unlock the ability to propel forwards. This uses a lot of fuel, but it's really helpful. Not just for exploring the map, but getting away from danger as well. Some places can only be explored if you have a certain fuel level, but there are some tricks that you can use while trying to reach a higher place. For example, if you don't move and just press and hold the jetpack button, you will spend a lot less fuel, while moving sideways while flying will burn the fuel really fast. And then you have the float button, which uses a lot less fuel and it's useful in different situations. Another major change that helps you with your jetpack exploration is the ability to grab on ledges. This is a huge deal, especially in the beginning when you don't have a lot of fuel capacity. Right after you get your jetpack, you can test this out on the first tall building nearby. This is a great subtle tutorial which shows you what to expect from jetpack exploration. You can reach the highest point of the building in a couple of ways, and one of them is by barely grabbing on the ledge. Your fuel regenerates if you just stand still a couple of seconds. So yeah, jetpack exploration is amazing. The whole map is built with the jetpack in mind, without feeling artificial and forced. But all of this wouldn't matter at all if the exploration by itself is not rewarding or fun. I mean, getting on high places can be fun by itself, but it will quickly get old if you don't have anything interesting to find. The game always rewards you for being curious, either with a unique weapon, some other useful item, or just with some great environmental storytelling. Finding unique weapons, or legendary weapons as the game calls them, is a lot more satisfying than in the first game. The quantity of these items is much greater in the sequel. I found around 15 legendary items so far, but I'm pretty sure there are more. We'll talk about the itemization soon. Other items you're going to find are usually really useful. You should loot almost everything because getting an exit is really important. It's not extremely hard to get the currency you need for buying items, but it's definitely not easy, especially when you need to buy a new armor set from a faction. One of the biggest improvements when it comes to finding items is the amount of locked chests and safes that you're going to find. This makes lockpicking and hacking skills a lot more relevant. But even if you don't get those skills, you will find a lot of chests that can be unlocked with a special key, and that special key is usually somewhere close, or a special number combination for the safe. More than often, this is implemented with some great environmental storytelling and you need to find some clues, but sometimes it's pretty straightforward. This makes exploring every corner of the map really fun. You'll find a lot of named chests in the game as well. Some of them are quest related, but others are, well, I don't want to spoil anything. Let's just say there is a special group of people in the game that you can find. It will make all Gothic 2 fans really happy. There is a lot to see and do in this world, especially if you want to experience everything that the game has to offer. The world feels alive and really immersive. The way that NPCs behave is also a big reason for that. As with every Piranha Bytes game, NPCs have a full day and night schedule. They will work, eat, sleep, and chill in the tavern if possible. But this time around there is more NPC activity, especially in big faction locations. For example, cultivators will get attacked by beasts, you can hear a lot of unique conversations related to current events, or witness the consequences after some quests.
I can't find anything in the system. It says you already took your ration earlier today.
Then the system is wrong. I didn't get anything.
No, the system is working fine. You already got your ration.
The AI seems to be coded in a way to have a much greater roaming range when it comes to some beasts. Not all of them, but some creatures will go really far from the place you first saw them. Sky creatures will fight against non-corrupted regular creatures, which is also really cool to see. And you will find a decent amount of NPCs in the open world outside of major locations, and they usually have a quest for you. Elex 1 was pretty good when it comes to quests, but I think Elex 2 is even better. All major characters are memorable and their problems are always believable. Even though the main narrative in the game is pretty serious, there are still goofy characters and silly quests to make you laugh.
You're back! Do you have my things? I'm Nils, by the way.
You were expecting me?
Wasn't I? That's a pity. Never mind. I guess we don't know each other then. I'm Eric, by the way.
Some will even test your knowledge about the past events in Elex 1.
During the war with the Albs, who was the highest-ranking warlord in Edan?
Since a lot of people are crazy lunatics and bandits who will either try to kill you or scam you, it's easy to start doubting everyone and be a complete asshole.
Fork over the Elexit, and we can forget this ever happened.
There are some really long side quests that I enjoyed quite a bit. Some NPCs have quests that require you to visit them a couple of times after a certain time period, so you can go and do something else and come back later. It's similar to how companions quests work. They hit you up next time when they see you in Bastion. That's another reason why the world feels more dynamic. You will still find some really simple kill quests though, but even those quests usually have some more thought put into them. Speaking of killing people, the main quest has a ton of fighting, so we should really start talking about the combat system. The combat system in Elex 1 was probably the biggest barrier to entry, and indeed the combat did have some problems. But I always thought that the reason why some people couldn't get into these games is the design philosophy of progression. You are always really weak in the beginning and it takes quite a while to get some good gear and levels. The game starts off really slow in general, so it takes a while to get used to it. And unlike some games, it doesn't spam you with tutorials, so it's all up to you to figure out how things work. But putting that aside, Elex 2 has some major improvements when it comes to combat system. First of all, the controls are much more responsive, which makes the movement and positioning in fights a lot easier. The combo system from the first game is completely scrapped. Now we have a simple quick and heavy attack with all melee weapons. But Jax also has a couple of more combat moves, which you can use in certain situations, like backstabs and this special strong attack when the enemy is knocked down. These attacks are actually game-changing because they deal tremendous amounts of damage, which gives every combat encounter a much needed dynamic. You can even take down high-level enemies even on ultimate difficulty, with not so great weapons by the way. It's not easy, but it's doable. The difficulties are more balanced and viable because of this. Elex 1 has some terrible balancing, which was mostly related to some unfinished combat mechanics. The stamina was supposed to play a much bigger role in that game, not only for Jax but for enemies as well. Elex 2's stamina system works a lot better. All living creatures have a stamina bar and you can knock down most of them when their stamina bar depletes. You can also use the parry button, which actually works now. One hit after the parry instantly knocks down enemies. The hitboxes are much improved and enemies' attacks are better telegraphed. I was complaining about all of this in one of my Elex 1 videos. I've said that some enemies just move too fast and they have unconventional attacks which are hard to dodge or parry. So they actually slowed down most of these animations and made the hitboxes a lot better. Along with adding a lot of new enemies, even though most of them share the same skeleton but they usually come with an extra attack. But more importantly, they fixed most of the problems that old creatures had, so this is great news. The dodge ability is more precise and it's a lot easier to dodge attacks. They even used the step dodge, which was totally ignored in the first game. Now if you use a shield or a two-handed weapon, your dodge roll turns into a step dodge. All of this combined makes the combat a lot better. There are still some bad hitboxes here and there, it's not perfect.
What?
There is an impressive amount of enemies to fight in the game, even though a lot of them are reskins of the same enemy. But like I already said, they usually have at least one extra attack. The design of enemies and the sky and aliens is pretty damn cool. By the way, Elex 2 doesn't have any boss fights. Well, maybe that's not true, it has a couple of fights that you could consider as boss fights. But it's not like in Elex 1, which had some defined boss fights. To be honest, those fights were terrible. So it seems like they decided to not bother with creating boss fights in Elex 2. I don't mind that at all because you can still find some crazy strong creatures which are similar to boss encounters. But if you expect to find Souls-like boss fights, you'll be disappointed. I talked about all combat mechanics in great depth in my combat guide, so definitely check that out if you plan to get the game. And I swear I can already hear you, what about the jank C4G, is it still janky? Hell yeah it is. Every now and then you're going to wonder what the hell just happened, but that's usually the case with the flying combats. Yeah, Elex 2 has some flying combat mechanics and they are not really that good. At least when it comes to normal attacks with your melee weapon. Unique faction abilities are pretty good in air combat, and you can effectively use the jetpack in fights against non-flying enemies. But fighting while in the air with your melee weapon is just not worth doing. It's always smarter to lure flying enemies on the ground. You can even parry them, which allows you to do some heavy damage. Flying combat just feels way too janky and fast for my liking. And all flying enemies feel the same to me. And it doesn't help that you have to worry about dying from falling because of the fuel. Only after I finished the game and unlocked the unlimited fuel, air combat became more bearable. Using ranged weapons while flying is a much better idea, especially when you unlock the ability to dodge in the air. I think the reason why they decided to include a flying combat system in the first place is to prevent you from abusing your jetpack functionality. Listen, just take a decent shotgun and get rid of the damn birds. Speaking about shotguns, Elex 2 has a great variety of weapons. You have a lot more weapons to find and buy in this game than in Elex 1. Unlike in Elex 1, all enemies drop their weapons upon death. But as you might guess, if you played GOTY games before, these weapons are always damaged. You need 3 of these weapons if you wish to repair it. And most of them can be further upgraded with the same process as long as you have the smithing ability and materials. The smithing ability is definitely worth getting. What I really like about this system is the fact that damage weapon and the same fully upgraded weapon require you to have the same stat points. It encourages you to find the same weapon and resources and improve it. Legendary weapons cannot be upgraded, but they usually deal some really nice damage with some elemental dots. These weapons require a lot of stat points though. However, this effect can be reduced by getting this specific ability. Although getting the stats you need for a weapon goes a lot faster than you think, and you can find a lot of potions which increase your stats as well. Speaking about the stats, now the game gives you some bonuses after you invest 5 skill points. The UI is much better now and it gives you all the info about your basic and advanced stats, unlike in Elex 1. But Elex 1 was a bit more immersive when it comes to this, because Jax used that thing in his hands. Getting new armors in Piranha Bytes games was always a big deal. And that haven't changed, but now we got a greater variety of armors which are not locked behind a faction. Merchants will get new armors and weapons after you reach a certain level or when you increase your rank with a faction. You still need to buy armors with your money except the first armor you get when you join a faction. I was kinda disappointed with Berserker armors. This design style is probably the better fit for them, but I still prefer the armors in Elex 1 when it comes to Berserkers. Alps and Morkans have some really cool armor designs though. My favorite part about the itemization in general is definitely legendary items. Most of them are really useful and finding them is really satisfying. And last but definitely not least, we have unique faction abilities. Every major faction in the game can teach you some useful abilities, which can totally change the way you play the game. Like I said, I was a berserker, and I also played a lot with Alps as well. The berserkers have a couple of fire spells and they use mana. For example, Fire Fist replaces your melee attacks and you can even block with it. It's upgradable as well. Fire Wave and Fire Rain are really powerful abilities that you can unlock. The Alps use Frost and Lightning magic. You get to harvest Elex from dead creatures to replenish your Elex bar. And as far as I'm aware, this is the only way to replenish your Elex bar. This creates a nice little gameplay loop. The Morkans have a lot of melee based abilities, so I'm definitely going to check that out on my next playthrough. Overall, I think the combat is a major improvement, even though the air combat is not that great. And I think Elex 2 is a lot more accessible for new players because of the better balancing. I suggest playing the game on normal, but you can experiment with the difficulties however you like. I beat the game on Ultimate and it felt really good. Elex 1 was horrible on Ultimate difficulty, it was almost completely broken. I'm really glad that's not the case with Elex 2. But the biggest problem I have with this combat is the lack of two-handed swords. We have two-handed axe and mace, but no swords, really? Come on. Although the sight is pretty cool. The best thing about the sound in general is the voice acting. I think it's really good with some exceptions here and there.
Don't get too close to the formers or their creatures until you've regained enough of your strength. We can't afford to lose you.
The voice actor for Jax is amazing. I had my doubts at first because it's not the same voice actor like in the first game. But this guy did an amazing job.
All I see is a resentful warrior who leads through fear. Carry on like this and soon your own people won't trust you anymore.
The followers and really important NPCs are no different, they have some pretty good voice acting. Not just for AA RPG standards, but just in general.
The money wasn't important. That guy fucked with the Duke. He had to be taught a lesson.
That wasn't always the case with these games.
Are you the one who runs this place?
I am Bromo, this is my house and these are my girls. I like my girls.
Yeah, we came a long way. The quality of sound effects is not terrible, but it's not great either. I think this is the main aspect of the game which really needs to improve, especially when it comes to weapon hits. Hitting some soft flesh enemies with your weapon sounds like you're hitting a trash can. But it's not all bad, the game has some decent sound effects like that ground smash for troll-like enemies. But the quality of sound effects is definitely inconsistent. I never thought I'm going to say this for a Piranha Bytes game, but music is really forgettable and generic. Gothic and Risen games had amazing soundtracks, especially Gothic 3, which is hands down my favorite game soundtrack ever. I don't even remember one specific track from this whole game. Ambient sounds are decent, and the game manages to create a nice atmosphere. But compared to their older games, they really dropped the ball with the soundtrack. Most tracks are remixed from the first game, and Elex 1 wasn't that great when it comes to soundtrack as well, but at least it had a couple of very good tracks. I just realized we didn't even mention the graphics in the game, but if you watch the video up to this point, I think you have a good idea how the game looks, right? Elex 2 doesn't look like a game from 2022, but there are definitely improvements on this field as well. Well, compared to the previous game at least. The lighting and the art style are the best parts about the graphics in this game. The environments look great if you ask me. Not that much because of the graphical fidelity itself, it's not up to pair with some newer games, which was to be expected. But the artistic style is great, especially because they managed to blend a couple of different themes together. Sci-fi, medieval and post-apocalyptic don't really go hand in hand, but the great art style is keeping the game together and hardly anything seems out of place. It's a little bit less cartoony than the first game, but it's still not going for that hyper-realistic look which doesn't age well. Stylized graphics always age better. The worst thing about the graphics are definitely character models. Some of them look decent while others are downright bad. What's kinda ironic when it comes to character faces is the lip sync. It's pretty damn good actually.
Listen up. You don't belong here, so this is the end of the line for you. And one more thing. The guards have orders to throw any trespassers out of the fort.
A lot better than some AAA RPGs even. I definitely didn't expect to see that, especially from a smaller studio. Even a lot of newer games have this tendency to cover people's faces with masks or helmets so they can get away with no lip sync. And I don't blame them because it's really hard to do, especially for small studios. So it's really refreshing to see some great lip sync from a AA RPG. Unfortunately, the performance is not that great on my PC. My PC is not that great either, but it should be able to handle the game. I was getting around 60 to 70 FPS outside of the major cities. But when I start exploring big cities, my FPS drops to 30 or even below that. I really wish to see a patch that will address this. Now let's draw the conclusion. I have no doubts in my mind that Elex 2 is a major improvement. It's almost everything I personally wanted from a sequel. Amazing open world to explore with great quests and a decent story. The characters are brought to life with memorable personalities and good voice acting, even though the story can drag a little bit with the sheer amount of dialogue it has. The ending was not that great, not because of the story itself, but because of the huge sequel baits. The combat system has improved a lot, as well as the balancing. It manages to be more accessible to new players, while still having a dangerous world to explore, full of secrets and interesting stuff to find. However, it was a bit predictable when it comes to some late quests, and there is a ton of fighting. I don't personally mind it because I'm really enjoying the new combat system, but I can see how people can find this annoying. It's dragging the main story quite a bit. Playing the game with different factions and trying out different builds gives the game a lot of replay value. This is the most dynamic world that Piranha Bytes ever created in terms of all the stuff that's going on around the player. There are a lot of scripted and random events as well. I just wish the music was better. They really need to bring back Kai Rosekrantz. You know, the guy that composed all the Gothic soundtracks. I definitely recommend trying out this game if you love open world RPGs. This is not a AAA quality RPG and you will definitely feel that in some segments. But underneath all of that, there is a great RPG with a lot of content. It could take you a while to get used to the slower pace in the beginning, but once it starts rolling, you can easily get hooked. And let's just take a moment to appreciate an open world single player RPG with no microtransactions. It's important to support smaller studios like this. You can only see them once every few years trying to make a good single player experience with no extra bullshit. That would be all for this review. Tell me your opinion about Elex 2 in the comments below. Do you plan to try it out or not? Leave a comment down below. Check out my other videos about this game that can help you understand some mechanics. Don't forget to subscribe for more RPG content. If you want to support the channel in the long run, consider becoming a Patreon or a YouTube member. You can get your name on the end credits as well as some other perks like early access to videos, Discord roles, my plans for future content, etc. etc. That will be all, and I'll see you in the next one.